Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thanks for all the intros popping up in the chat. Really excited to be back for another mobilizer session. Hello. So we got Calgary, folks joining from Toronto. Welcome. So glad to be here and hold space with you all. My name is Tashaila Bailey, and I'm the program lead of HCI. Today, I want to acknowledge that while we're joining online for this virtual webinar, that we are having participants and speakers from all across Canada, and this includes First Nation, Inuit, and Métis communities. I myself am joining from what is now known as Newmarket, Ontario, on the traditional lands of the Haudenosaunee, Wendat, and Anishinaabe peoples. Thank you all so much for joining us at our latest mobilizer session. I'll be one of the co-moderators for the next hour and a half, and I am joined by my colleague. I'll turn it over to her.
Hi, everyone. So nice to join you all today. My name is Eva Morrison, and I'm the storytelling lead for Canada Healthy Communities Initiative. So before we dive into the discussion, I'd just like to share a few Zoom reminders. So this session will be available in English and French. So at the bottom, you can select your preferred channel by clicking on the globe icon and switching between English and French. We'll also have closed captions available in English, so you can click the captions option that's also at the bottom of your screen there. If anyone joining has any technical issues, please let me know through the chat and we'll be able to give you some direct support. We'll also have the chat going for participants throughout. We're also really excited to be joined today by Patricia, our graphic recorder, who will be creating a visual of the session throughout. So we'll be able to capture some of the insights that are shared by the panelists live, and we'll be able to share that as well. So thank you, Patricia. And I'll also thank our two interpreters who are with us today, Paul and Yannick, who will be interpreting on the French side of things. So again, feel free to join the French channel to hear live in French.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Eva. And on today's session, I know we are all joining to talk about this exciting topic of how we could shift the relationship between funders and grantees. To support that conversation, we have a number of speakers that will be doing a bit of presenting as well as an open discussion for the last hour or so of our call today. I would like to formally introduce Jonathan, who's joining us from the Network for the Advancement of Black Canadians, Alyssa and Kathleen that are joining us from the Community Foundations of Canada, and Jason joining us from Rise Entertainment, and Adam joining us from Activate YYC. Now at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Jonathan to kick us off with a brief presentation.
Thank you, Tashaila, and thank you, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning for some of you. I'm very happy to be with you and share some of my thoughts. And I just wanted to maybe take a time to give you a bit about the organization that I work for, the Network for the Advancement of Black Communities. We are an organization, a systems change, systems transformation organization that works with in the interface between government, philanthropy, and nonprofit organizations. And we understand that the challenges that our communities face is something that cannot be resolved or addressed by individuals or individual organizations. So we believe the ecosystem approach to solving and addressing some of the challenges that we face. And when we say ecosystem approach, it means that everyone that actually contributes to the support and to resolve some of the issues that we deal with in our society, and also the idea of kind of collaboration to be able to bring the wisdom in the community and to use the assets in the community to address some of the challenges that we face. So in my role, as part of this project, we were the technical partner, the strategic partner, and the work that I have done with many of the organizations that are funded under the Healthy Communities Initiative, and the area of evaluation and learning is an area that I've focused, and I think it's important that some of the things that I'm sharing with you is something that we learned, and I think all of you have learned throughout this journey. And this is more about sharing perspectives and sharing lessons learned. It's not necessarily about sort of just top-down approach. We're all kind of bringing the different things that we've learned throughout and sharing. So I know I can sometimes I tend to speak a little bit long-winded, but I'll try to be brief and a bit focused so that we have all the time to engage. One of the things that we learned, so I'll tell you this in terms of supporting organizations to think about evaluation and learning. Some of the things that we learned was that I think part of the funding system, for example, is just it's a bit challenging for all different players or different stakeholders to actually have a shared understanding of what they're trying to do, so that when you're actually thinking about evaluation and collecting information that helps to understand the impact of our collective work, sometimes if the relationship is more transactional, where the focus is more to report on what funders are looking for, as opposed to what the different stakeholders are actually learning, and that can lead to kind of there might be some missed opportunities to be able to understand and to learn from the work that we're doing. So one of the things that we learn is, I think, collectively, all of us, I think it's important that we talk about how we shift our relationship in terms of funding and our reporting relationship, our evaluation relationship, from what is mostly right now more transactional to something that's transformational. Next slide, please. So this is just an invitation, for all of us to begin to think about, how do we actually move from where we are now to what it could be transformative for all of us in terms of the work that we do and the kind of impact that we want to create. So if you think about, the what's in the middle graphic, which is the communities, nonprofits, and funders, whether you're doing placemaking, projects or any other projects, that these are the three important key stakeholders in the work that we do. And so it's important that all of us, the three, have a shared understanding of what we're trying to do. So when you think about the funding relationship, that in a transactional relationship, what can happen is that if there is kind of, because there's a bit of limit in terms of that there's a shared understanding of what we're trying to achieve. So sometimes I think this could lead to missed opportunities around learning, but also around forgetting that there are other stakeholders that are actually important say in understanding what needs to happen, but also understanding what we need to change. So when you look at the two sides in terms of what it could look like, so if you're using the funding and evaluation relationship in a way that doesn't meet the needs of all stakeholders, I think we're missing an opportunity. But in a transformative, relationship, because you're actually coming together from the very beginning to understand what the challenges are, and then what are some of the proposed solutions that we are putting forward, and then how do we actually learn together as we implement them together. So I think this is something that all of us have to actually change in trying to shift that relationship. So so this is one of the key lessons learned. Next slide, please. So so part of the shared understanding, establishing a shared understanding at the beginning is that I think to ask ourselves, all of us, that why do we do evaluation? What's the purpose of evaluation? So if evaluation is not helping us in improving what we're doing, if it's not generating and deepening our understanding of what works and what doesn't work, and for whom and why, if it's not helping us to make informed decisions, and then if it's not actually helping us to meet the accountability needs for all the stakeholders, then why are we doing evaluation? So this is a question that we need to pose as we do this work. And this is another key lesson that we learned, that we're inviting everyone to start thinking about these key questions. Next slide, please. So if you, again, I mean, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but if you think about when you're thinking as an organization, planning any interventions that or programs that you part of the placemaking work, and then how funders sometimes can ask the set of questions that they ask you when you're actually applying for funding are kind of mirror each other. I think what's missing in general is that if we all collectively follow this line of thinking from understanding the needs and proposing what needs to be done, and then having robust and strong evaluation plan in place, and then really collecting the information that we need as a collective with different stakeholders, and then using that information both to improve our work, but also to make decisions about what happens in terms of whether we scale up, whether we expand, or how do we learn from things that didn't work. This is what could be like an interesting and a very clear guide, even though life doesn't happen as clear as what you see in the graphic, but it's important as to use as a compass collectively and go through that process. So this could be a way for us to continue to have that shared understanding, but also being able to learn together, about what works and what doesn't work, and how we actually can tell the impact of the work that we do collectively. Next slide, please. So one of the things that I think maybe I would kind of share both as a lesson to learn, but as a way to clarify, is that I think when we talk about evaluation as part of the funding relationship, sometimes I think what funders think as an impact or what communities think as an impact may not be the same. As this goes back to why it's important for us to have a shared understanding, but to actually do, to be able to report the work that we do, then we have to be able to do evaluation. So to do evaluation, then we need capacity to be able to do, strong evaluation so that we can tell our stories better. So there's two things, from having an evaluative mindset versus evaluation know-how. So evaluation know-how can be addressed by investing in capacity building so that organizations can actually strengthen their capacity to do evaluation better. And then funders in collaboration with organizations can actually really understand what's happening and how we learn together. But the other key important is, do we have evaluative mindset? So this really is for all organizations and for all other stakeholders who are actually part of this journey, to have the mindset for evaluation. So you don't necessarily need to be a data scientist to ask an evaluation question. So if you're an executive director of an organization, or any staff in the organization, or volunteer, it's important to have that mindset that is what we're doing actually making a difference. How are we making a difference? How does the work that we do actually help, the people that we're working with? How are we actually learning as an organization? These are the kind of questions that someone with evaluative mindset can ask. But you can then use those who have the skills around evaluation to be able to help us to do the work and actually get important data to help us how we are learning and how we are actually improving the work that we're doing. So it's always good to make a distinction between performance measurement. Some of the examples here in the slide is that if you can ask whether we have been able to provide what we set out to do, whether we have been able to have enough resources to be able to do the work. This kind of questions are performance measurement questions. But if you want to learn a little bit more, so that's the evaluation question, where you can see the arrows between the two, between investment strategies, outcomes, and impact. Then we can ask deeper questions. Which strategies, for example, are we think more responsible for some of the outcomes that we see, or what's missing? So there's a deeper conversation, a deeper learning with evaluation. But this can only happen if we actually have a space, all of us, to be able to speak, to be able to engage in evaluation without feeling that there is a pressure, just to report, as opposed to, using evaluation as a way to learn, but also part of accountability is also that you've learned from the work that we have done. And I think one of the things that I think, again, I would leave you to continue to think about is that, for every work that we've done, unless it's something that has been well supported as something that works, most of the work that we do in the community is actually, we have a rationale, and we're kind of testing our assumptions, testing our theories. And part of that is actually in doing the work, then you learn what works and what doesn't work. I think this is something that I think we need to reclaim as a collective, as collective of stakeholders, so that we can actually do much better with the work that we're doing. There's a lot of impactful work that has been done with the placemaking, and I think, how do we harness that? How do we tell that story? Is something that we need to collectively continue to think and do more. Next slide, please. The other one, I think this is part of the other. So I think, I'm pretty good. I just time myself, so I have a couple of minutes left. So just to quickly, summarize before I hand it over to Alisa and Caitlin, is that then again, how do we shift, all of us, not just funders, all of us, how do we shift from the kind of relationship that we're on now in terms of funding and evaluation to something that is transformative, that makes meaning and makes authentic meaning to the work that we do, and how do we create a courage for all of us to be able to speak when things are not working. It's an opportunity for lessons learned and for improvement, so that part of the reporting relationship becomes more of an opportunity for learning rather than an opportunity to sort of point fingers or feel a little bit pressured. So I think this is something that all of us can do. And I think evaluation mindset is half the battle. So organizations, funders, the evaluation mindset and the desire to want what makes a difference. Are we making a difference through the work that we're doing? What needs to change? That kind of deep questions is something that is like half the battle. And I think then we need the capacity to be able to collect data that's able to answer those questions. Is something more of a building capacity, but also working with people who have the requisite skill to help us. So this is important for us to remember, important for us to think about. And then again, overall, the work that we do is very challenging, and I think it requires some creativity, some bold action. And I think this is an opportunity for us to dig deeper. Thank you very much, and I'll hand it over now to Alisa and Caitlin. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Jonathan. That was beautifully said and exactly on time. I think we're ahead of schedule. My name is Kathleen Slemon, and I'm the manager of monitoring, evaluation, and learning at the Community Foundations of Canada. And I'm joined by my colleague who will introduce herself quickly, and then we'll jump into our slides.
Thanks, Kathleen. Hi, everyone. I'm Alyssa Becker, and I'm here today from CFC. I've worked as a program coordinator for the Healthy Communities Initiative for the last few years, was involved in the beginning with program design, and have been supporting our local CFs across our communities, as well as the public applicants and funded projects as well. So happy to be here to share today and to learn.
And just before I dive in, maybe a little background about CFC, Community Foundations of Canada. For those who don't know, we are the national member organization for local community foundations. And so we support them on these large funding projects. We're a partner with CUI, and we're in a really unique position, I think, and I just want to name it, that we are both a funder in that we sort of support these large granting programs. We provide backbone support like evaluation forms, final reporting, software, and that sort of thing. But we're also in partnership with government funders. So in some ways, they're the funder as well. And so in some ways, we play an intermediary role, and in other ways, we're very much wearing that funder hat. And I just want to name it because it's a complicated ecosystem, and I think it's a really important conversation to have. And Jonathan set us up so beautifully today to have this conversation because evaluation can be both a beautiful opportunity to learn and really demonstrate the great work that organizations are doing and tell their stories in these really impactful ways. But when it's not set up for success, it can be very transactional and one more thing to do on a very busy organization's to-do list. And I think as an organization and as a sector, we should always be looking to improve and make sure that it's not transactional and that organizations are supported, because again, as Jonathan said, it's a beautiful opportunity for learning, for storytelling, for communication, and to improve services and programs and make sure that they're as effective as they can be. So not about accountability, but about that growing and learning. And so this presentation is a really interesting opportunity for us to reflect on our practices as wearing that sort of funder hat and how we can improve and support better. And I think one thing that I often see in my work is how evaluation often gets built at the end of a program or, past that halfway mark. And I think that's something that anyone, funders, grantees, can just start thinking about sooner. I think Jonathan spoke to this, that evaluation mindset can be built in at any point in a program. And as funders, we should think about really setting up organizations early on to know, like, this is what we should be reporting on. This is how we should be thinking about evaluation. Here are some things to consider as the program is going so that data can be collected in a way that's not burdensome, instead of waiting until the very end and trying to look back. Can be quite challenging to assess the impact when we didn't know that's what was going to be collected or was going to be asked. And I think that's just a good practice that if not done, it can feel very transactional and very focused on accountability. And it's, I think, a frustration if it's not started sooner. And I think when we do this, what it really does is it lets us be agile, and we can focus on learning, we can focus on feedback, and we can change priorities, we can shift, we can pivot as needed. Some of these funding programs and projects I know happened in very difficult and complicated times. Priorities were shifting. COVID, there was lots of changes being made. And if we're able to collect information as we go, either as a funder or a recipient, reflecting on those questions, is this working? How do we know this is the right approach? Allows us to be agile and make changes as needed, which is really, really important. As in the not-for-profit sector, things are seemingly always changing quite quickly. Next slide, please. So I think one thing to really highlight too is that reporting and evaluation are one piece of a project story. And something I often hear is, well, you can't just reduce all our work to a number or a stat. And that's true. There's so much more to every project. And it can be hard to figure out how to tell that story through evaluation. But there are ways to do that. And Jonathan spoke to that. There is a capacity piece where, you can find ways to creatively tell your story in a way that is speaking the same language across different stakeholders, and really helps to create that common language between funders and recipients and other stakeholders. So even though it's true that there's so much more to every story, like at CFC, we like to say that behind every statistic, there's a story, and behind every story, there's a statistic, but it's not as exciting the other way around. It does help to be thinking that way throughout a project and collecting that data as we go, because it does create that common language and something everybody can sort of gather around, but just recognizing that, of course, there's always stories behind those stats, and those are really important as well. And so I'm going to turn over to Alyssa in just one moment, but I just wanted to really acknowledge that when evaluation is too rigid and transactional, we do lose that nuance, and it becomes focused on outcomes that maybe don't resonate instead of the learning and that real impact that's situated in the context of each program. And so I think as funders, as people engaging in evaluation in whatever capacity, it's important to think about not being too rigid and not being too narrow in our scope, and really being open to, like I said, there's many different ways to share data, to share impact, and finding the best ways for your organization, for your context, for your project can really help tell that story. And Jonathan actually described it really well, and that's just where the evaluation know-how comes in. But I'm going to turn over to Alyssa because she's going to speak more about our projects and how we like to understand the stories as well.
Thanks, Kathleen. Hi, everyone. Yeah, I think that what Kathleen and Jonathan have both said has just been so well said, and really good points made that, and Kathleen, thank you for speaking to the sort of interesting ecosystem that we live in, as that in the middle ground sometimes between the federal government or the ultimate funder and then our fund recipients. And it's also such a gift to be in that space too, because we are always able to hear both sides, and we're able to advocate, and that's such an important space to be in. I think that all the reasons that have been said here by Kathleen and Jonathan as to why evaluation and collecting data and having the reports are so important, not just for our own program design as we move forward and we design programs within communities, but also to help us advocate, and whether that's advocating for timelines or extensions or flexibility or pivots or more than one-time funding, all these different things that have come up in the Healthy Communities Initiative. As we know, this is a program that has gone on for a few years, and I have spent 3 years on email and on phone calls and in Zoom meetings and chats, just in check-ins with so many of our projects across the country. And I know personally just how many challenges have come up because of, given the time we were in during the pandemic. And thankfully, we have had extensions that have allowed us to, through the round 1, round 2, round 3, take some of these learnings and apply them, and as we've moved through the rounds here. But I think, Kathleen, what you said about having the evaluation and that feedback early, so not just at the end, is really a crucial part here. And I think that the thing that we've learned in our role is that if we can support and be here to try to understand the evaluation and understand the feedback that we're getting, human to human, that's just a really important thing. And whether that's been through emails, but then to be able to jump onto phone calls and to support and to be able to really understand struggles and challenges and staff retention and turnover and all the things that so many of you have experienced through this journey, and not just the success stories, but to really be able to bring back beyond just performance, the pieces that really help us think about how we can make things more equitable and make things more accessible as we create programs and work with our local CFs. And Kathleen mentioned our sort of umbrella organization with our community foundation members, and really our role is to be as clear. If we are clear with our CFs on what we need, then they are better able to be clear with their communities and with the organizations and CSOs that they're dealing with and have local context with. And so we're constantly trying to better that. And within this evaluation and this language that Kathleen said, things that everyone can sort of relate to across the board, that helps us to do that as we move forward through program design. So, yeah, I think that obviously there were many HCI projects. We've tried to be able to capture things off of the page, off of the reports, with the help of CUI and so many of our technical partners through storytelling. We ourselves have done site visits and have, been able to go on site and really be able to hear beyond the interim reports, beyond the final reports, what communities were able to do, what organizations were able to do with the funding, and tried to just enter that space with as much curiosity and openness that we can, that we're not there to be like just measuring performance and that it's a check-in and that you've fulfilled what you said in your contract. It's about really trying to go in with a curiosity, and also that it's a privilege to go and to hear and see firsthand what people are doing and the hard work that's happening to make these projects a success. And there has been a tremendous amount of work that has gone into so many of these projects. So I think that it's really important for us to be able to go to be able to hear from a human perspective, because it builds that trust. It opens that trust for recipients to be able to not just feel like they can't tell us what we want to hear about the challenges. It's important for us to hear about the success stories, and that check, this was met, these are the needs, but that we're really also hearing about the things that came up that were big challenges. Because when we hear similar stories, when we start getting like, okay, we're having a lot of applicants that are having this same issue. We're having a lot of people that maybe don't understand this question or whatever in a report. These are things that help us to move forward and say, okay, we need to go back and we need to learn from, we need to re-examine this as a team, or talk to our ultimate funder, the government, whoever, to figure out how we can move within this. And so, yeah, I think that ultimately the learning how the funding can become a catalyst for so many other things that are happening for an organization and for a community is really a big part of that evaluation, and is just a really important thing for us. And yes, the reporting, of course, the reports that are mandatory to do are a critical part for us to bring back. But beyond that, I think that this program more than ever has really taught me and taught us the nuances, and how, being too rigid with what we're asking for, or just what we're looking for. Yes, things can absolutely get lost. And so it's been really important to keep that open communication with our funded recipients as we've moved through the years here together. So I'm gonna pass it back over to Jonathan, unless Kathleen, you have anything else to add. You're good? Okay. Thanks, Jonathan.
Thank you, Kathleen and Alisa. I think this is probably where we feel a little bit more relaxed, and I think we might have kind of quickly try to finish our presentation so that we can have the bigger discussion. People can join in. But what I would probably before I start to talk, bringing Jason and Adam, is that I think I will be available for any one of you who would love to re-engage in terms of some of the things that we shared. If we don't have the time to do it today, and I'm willing to actually connect with you. So I just want to put that at first. So I would love to call Jason and Adam to introduce themselves and maybe share a bit about their work. And then if you can share your thoughts around what are some of the ways for funders to understand the impact that organizations are making beyond just the financial and the reports.
Yeah, can you guys hear me? Perfect. Thank you, Janssen, for the introduction. So my name is Jason. I'm here on behalf of Rise Entertainment, also known as Rise Arts and Community Services. We were a funded group as well by the HCI back in 2021. The project that we were funded for was to provide spoken word poetry programming, as well as performances during the pandemic. As you can probably tell, it was quite a difficult task to have to do that during that period, especially during the time of when everything was all about social distancing, ensuring that limited numbers in terms of participants in a single room. Fortunately for us, our project was outdoors, and so we had a little bit of more flexibility in terms of how many people we were able to gather during that time. And it went well successfully during the summer of 2021 and 2022. I will get into more details about it later, but I do want to give an opportunity for Adam to introduce himself as well.
Awesome, thanks so much. Yeah, my name's Adam. I'm the director of the Activate YYC program within the Federation of Calgary Communities. So we are a tactical urbanism and placemaking grant program that supports, everyday residents, community associations, businesses, organizations with their tactical urbanism dreams. So we offer anywhere from $1,000 to $10,000 for these projects. We're running around 30 projects every year. So just get a lot of fast-paced projects that happen really quickly. So I think, yeah, I've been reflecting a little bit on our role both as a funder, but also as we assess the needs of our groups that we're funding. We always just want to grow as a program, so we're always looking for funding to expand our program as well, which is super exciting. So yeah, really happy to be here today and hear what everyone has to share.
So maybe we can go to the question. I think maybe you can also add. So just the question is, I think an important one in terms of what are some of the ways funders understand the impact that organizations are making. I think from the intermediary role that you play, and then from a recipient perspective. But I think also if you can incorporate, I think it's good to hear from you your perspective around how did you learn, what if you've done any level of evaluation, what was it like, and then what have you learned?
Sure, yeah. So I think for us, because we are micro grants and are sometimes giving as low as $500 or $1,000, I think for us, we really lean into tactical urbanism, which is kind of just the test, pilot, try and fail method. So I love that amount of kind of dollar value that you can give out because sometimes there's projects that come into your inbox and you're not sure how they might pull things off, but I think it's just that willingness to give them the funds to try what their idea is in the public realm. And then in terms of reporting, I think what I really like hearing out of those projects specifically is just the challenges that you faced. I almost sometimes would rather hear what went poorly so that you can kind of figure out as a program how can we better support you. Whether it was, you had a really difficult time working with permitting with the city, or you had really difficult time with volunteer recruitment. I think sometimes there's a dynamic of, I think there's a question later on about the power dynamic. And obviously when you're given money, you always want to create an impression that it was used very well. But if there's challenges that were faced, I think that's equally important to hear. And, just being vulnerable on that side. So yeah, I think for us, we just want to kind of communicate that as a program that we're open to the try and fail methods. And I think the element of success for us is just getting the project on the ground in the first place, because we deal with a lot of physical, tangible projects. So I think the biggest failure as a program for us would be the organizations that aren't even able to begin their project and they end up having to pull out of the agreement. So I think a bit of the learning that I took away was that we should almost try and figure out as a program how we can evaluate those relationships as well, of those projects that didn't even get off the ground, and how we can actually support them from there, because oftentimes we're not gathering reports or insight from those groups. So yeah, that's just my quick learnings there.
Fantastic. Jason?
Yeah, in terms of like speaking from a grantee's perspective, and from my from my own organization's perspective as well, it may be different for others that have a different kind of programming. Our programming at Rise is primarily arts programming, performance based. A lot of community coming together and experiencing and adjusting, art as opposed to create as well as creating art as well too. And so it might be different for others who may be, into the physical activity, play, sports, recreation, and things of that sort. But it's still kind of it could benefit you in hearing this. But yeah, in terms of our relationships with a funder, of course, when we are given the opportunity to fund to have our programs and projects funded, a lot of the focus is in the delivery of the program, whether it is on executing on the goals that we set out, ensuring that our community is receiving the best possible program that we are able to give. But of course, on the flip side as well too, is we also have to report and ensure that the funders understand where their money is going towards. Is it being utilized? Is the community being impacted? And so with our programming, with arts programming, we do tend to focus on ensuring that our community comes first, of course, because they are, at the end of the day, they are the beneficiaries. They are the ones that benefit from the work that we are doing. And so in our philosophies, when we try to do that and put that as at the center of what we try to do, great things usually tend to happen. So we try to capture as much great things, whether that is via recordings, vocal recordings, video recordings, photography recordings, as much evidence that we can possibly show to say that things were actually happening in person, if they can't come in person. We also try to even include the funders by inviting them to our events or programs, because usually if we are doing a program, it's usually a multi-week program, so they have an ample amount of time to at least come to one session, or if not, the videos and the photos and the recordings will kind of provide that experience for them. And so we try to ensure that the recordings as well are high quality recordings. During that time, the recordings were, of course, through Zoom for some of the workshops, so they weren't always the best, but we tried to at least capture the magic that does happen in those sessions that were virtual. And then once we were able to do them in person, we ensured that the documenting was also a part of the budget, but also ensuring that they were a high quality documenters. So photography and videography was of high quality, so that it could actually feel, like maybe you're watching a short film, a short documentary as to what the impact was in terms of the funds that the grants that were given to us, how were they properly utilized. And so that's usually how we try to ensure funders are in the know of as to what's happening with our programs, on top of like the interim reports and whatnot, but generally trying to get them involved, present in the programming is one of our priorities. Or if not, again, like, and I understand a lot of people, like as Alyssa said, she's traveling across the country and liaising with multiple funders across the country. So availability isn't always the case. So at least trying to provide a secondary opportunity for them to experience it, which is through the recordings. And yeah, that's always been a philosophy of ours, to ensure that the funder gets to experience the great things that the program participants and our community experiencing too. Because without the two together, like what do we do? Where do we go with what needs to happen, and how do we fund our ideas? And usually you need a great marriage of the two, or of the two coming together, and to ensure that things are moving properly.
Fantastic. And I think I see Caitlin is smiling and Alisa also smiling. I think it's just the same smile that I have. I think hearing both of you, point out what we talked about earlier about the shared understanding and that this is a collective responsibility as opposed to, one or
Absolutely.
another. So it's fantastic to hear. And Kathleen and Alisa, anything that you'd like to add in terms of um, how do funders kind of understand the impact organizations are creating beyond the reporting? I know you mentioned a little bit, but if there's anything else that you wanted to highlight, that'd be great.
I can just share, we do love these invitations, these recordings, photos. It doesn't always fit neatly into a report, but it is appreciated. It's a wonderful thing to be able to get a snapshot of the amazing work that's happening because especially depending on structures of some reports, they're pretty narrow, like I said, and just having some space to hear sort of in your own format about the impact is really special because I think Jason said it was sort of a marriage of the two. In a perfect world, there would be more systems in place where everyone could report back in the ways that make the most sense to them. And in the meantime, how do we sort of bring those two together so we're landing somewhere in the middle? And I think alternative formats like that are amazing and really exciting for us. Melissa, I'm not sure if there's anything else you want to add.
No, not really. Just I would agree. I think that yeah, it's lovely when you open an interim or final report and you see that they've uploaded a video or some sort of like, really interesting creation that the organization has come up with to show the project results or things that are happening in the community. And yeah, it's that whole conversation again around that, like, the written word isn't just the like end all be all of the best way to do things. So yeah, that's what we're here to discuss.
I know I again, I think both the two things that, Jason talked about centering the community, and then, Adam also talked about, I'm telling you, I'm just going nuts when he said, we in fact are more interested to know the things that didn't go off the ground, and things that didn't work. And I think this is fantastic to hear, because I think that's exactly how we collectively move these things forward. But I think we also have to talk about the imbalance of power between funders and organizations. So I think, how do we address that? What ideas do you have, or at least from your experience, what are some of the things that can address that? Centering the community is one way, but I think ultimately it's a collective responsibility in terms of bringing that kind of environment. So any thoughts? Anyone can jump in.
I can jump in to start because I think this is a really tricky one. I think it makes perfect sense that recipients want to put their best foot forward and show the amazing work that we know has been done with the funds, and maybe not wanting to center challenges they experienced or lessons learned. And I just really want to reiterate what Adam said, that wearing a funding hat, if we don't know what the challenges were, it actually can be a bit of a disservice to the program, because then we're not in a position to advocate or address changes or support if extensions are needed, if there's supports we can offer. But I would also say that as wearing a funding hat, of course, there's this imbalance. And I think as a sector, we need to be better at signaling and opening up the door that this is something that is welcome, that we want to hear, and asking questions like, what challenges did you face? What did you learn? And really making sure that we're walking the walk and not penalizing organizations in any way for sharing those learnings, right? And so recognizing that that's a vulnerable and brave and important piece of information for us to have, and not going back and saying, what do you mean you did it? Or things like that. And so I think in general, it's about, with that evaluative mindset, really building in from the start. We want to know how things are going, and we will take that information and receive it in a way that is supportive. And I think that as funders in general, that's something that like all funders could be more aware of, because there's objectively a power imbalance, regardless of how well-intentioned everybody is. And I think it's on funders to really make sure that that's communicated from the get-go, or else, of course, recipients will maybe want to lead with some big challenges. I think that's completely understandable.
Yeah, I would add to that as well that within this learning, I agree. And yes, Jason, I think we're all like, yes, that's the thing. Like we want to hear about what's going wrong, because what I was saying earlier is, especially when in those times when an application opens or a program first launches, like when you start hearing the same thing, the same challenges, the same, like, we don't understand what's being asked here. We don't understand what this question means, or this and the point, like that's so crucial for us to like communicate as a team, to say at CFC, to say, okay, this is coming up. This is coming up as like a real frustration point, whether it's from our CFs that come to us with a challenge that we're hearing across the board from our CFs, or from our applicants or our recipients. And that's something we've really tried to look at when we say the clear is kind about, why are we wording something like this? Do we really need to ask this question? Like let's make sure that we're really only asking people for what we need, and asking them to do the work that's required, because everyone we know across the sector is stretched so thin and is having all sorts of challenges. And so let's be really as kind as we can to say, what is it that we need? What is it that will be helpful to ask and that's required? And how can we be as clear as possible? And really hear when we are getting these repeat complaints or challenges or things that are coming up. And it's just so crucial for us.
Jason or Adam, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think for me, obviously with our program being, I would say, a smaller funder, just in terms of our own capacity and our own kind of monetary amount that we're handing out. I think we're dealing with a lot of people who this might be their first grant application ever. This is people who are volunteering for their community association, and are maybe tackling their first community initiative. So for us, I think obviously the kind of application process is as simple as it can be for us. I think we start off with 3 questions where it's what's your project, where is it, and what's your, just throw out a dollar amount you think it's going to cost. And we kind of pre-screen those applications and then can communicate them with them after, to kind of do a couple phases, so that it's not as kind of intimidating from the start, and kind of try and keep that kind of grassroots approach throughout, keeping things as simple as they can possibly be. We're lucky that we have a funder for our program in the city of Calgary that they understand the community associations and the capacity that differs between them. And that's why we're lucky to be operated by the Federation of Calgary Communities, who is able to kind of have a pulse on the communities around our city and how, certain areas of the city are going to have different challenges. So I think I see Kimberly's question there about sometimes funders maybe being naive about conditions of community. And I think, I think for us, at least at Activate, we're lucky that I have people I can reach out to and say, hey, this community applied, kind of what's their capacity, what's the landscape, what have they kind of been trying to do over the past few years, and how does this project fit into that? So yeah, that's kind of our approach at Activate.
Jason?
Yeah, I think it definitely comes down to communication. The big thing here that we're all speaking about is, of course, communicating those challenges. When I first started with my organization, but also just with the community work, I'll admit, like, expressing and sharing challenges is very daunting, knowing that you're a young organization. Maybe funding isn't quite there yet to get you to operation levels, to have your operations funded. And so being very, very adamant about ensuring the good things about your program is on the forefront, to ensure hopefully that additional funding will come your way. But then now, as I find myself with like almost a decade of experience now, it's like now I'm looking forward to actually sharing these issues and challenges that we are addressing as we're trying to complete the project, because it really doesn't do anybody of service if all you're saying is and sharing is the great stuff and not sharing the true things that are happening behind as you're doing the work. And not to say like you have to report on every single issue, but the real things that that a funder should understand, such as the things that are currently happening in your communities. And I'll give an example for our project, specifically, of course, with the whole being in a pandemic and social distancing. We had to put a pause, basically half a year on putting together the actual showcase, which was supposed to be in person. That was supposed to happen during the summer of 2021. During that time, the city wasn't providing any permits. They weren't allowing for anyone over over a gathering of 10 people within a certain amount of distance, and so that just wasn't even going to work for us if we were to put on a showcase for the community. And so we had to communicate with HCI that this is our issues right now, and literally they came back with let's get you the support. They helped out with trying to connect us with the right people to ensure that we get the permits, and they were kind enough to bless us that everything was going to be okay, and that if we had to push back any of our elements to the following year, that was totally fine. And these are just some stuff that, had we not communicated these things with HCI as a group, you would internalize all these failures and thinking that just because you didn't deliver on this one thing, that's it for your project, when that wasn't even the case. They, as a funder, HCI supported us and ensured us that timing is of course important, but at the same time, as long as we were getting things done in a way that was in accordance to Health Canada at the time, but as well as delivering on the items, we could take all the time in the world that we needed, as long as it was reasonable. But also ensuring that we were not taking this time just for the sake of it, but it was out of our control. And so just being able to communicate these things, again, like you're not internalizing that stress, you're not internalizing all the failures and the challenges that you're having, and that funders are there to give you support, and I hope that applies for most, if not all, funders. But of course, having that communication line with the funders, it does kind of help with that balance. But really and truly, what would help with that balance is, of course, having people like us in those positions. Like, if it's not going to work if someone's on the outside looking in, trying to support you when it comes down to it. They have to first learn what are the variables and things that are happening in your communities, and then that alone takes time and understanding and listening and conversation and all that stuff to happen. But if in order to really have those power imbalances and changes, definitely speaking up for yourself, advocating for your groups, advocating for your communities. And if you do find that you have the time to apply or join the team, then that's one way of really changing that balance. Because again, not having the experience and understanding of communities is not necessarily a downfall, but is usually something that a lot of people lack. And so having people with those experiences in those positions, I feel that's one of the greatest way to really address that power imbalance.
Oh, this is fantastic. I think we can have this conversation for maybe another 5 hours. I just want to just very quickly, I think part of it is also, I know, Caitlin, you said, of course, funders have to be able to create that space for people to be able to share openly. And I think I also agree with Jason that I think organizations also need to be able to push gently to funders, and sometimes helping them to understand the context under which they're working in communities and some of the challenges. And sometimes I think funders may not be doing this on purpose, but sometimes I think in the process of going through the process of funding agreements or funding partnership, relationship, I think there are moments where, you might feel like, oh, I think the outcomes that you're asking for are actually not realistic. So unless we have the space to be able to say that, or the sort of it being empowered to say that, and I think sometimes it's very challenging because again, for for small organizations, particularly, it can be, between operating and not operating the things that you do. So sometimes we also need to understand some of those challenges. So I think it's a collective responsibility that slowly we need to kind of put out some of those challenges and trying to shift the relationship. But a lot of the examples that you shared actually are bang on, and I think it's not something that changes overnight, but I think we need to continue to have these conversations and shift the practices. I think okay, a couple of questions are left, but I think one of them actually kind of covered it with some of the examples that we shared, but also kind of how we create atmosphere for this kind of investment where funders and an organization actually work together and are invested. But I think the other question maybe is a little bit around, kind of sharing some best practices, from funding perspective, how to sustain some of the activities. I think this is a sustainability question. And I think maybe if I could probably go back to you, Caitlin or Alisa, to start us. I think sustainability is a big question, and then maybe we can kind of chat a bit, and then I'll have Tishaila let us know how we're doing with time. I think this conversation is so engrossing that we're not sure how well we're doing it with time. Caitlin.
You're on time. We got about 25 more minutes, and there's a couple questions that came up from the chat too. So you're doing.
Okay.
Oh, yes.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I think sustainability is a really, really hard one in this sector. And I think it's important to name that a lot of funding programs right now don't provide ongoing funding. And I think I just want to name that because that is a huge gap in the sector. A lot of projects and programs a lot of funding programs provide funding for new projects, which is exciting, but there's a lot of great projects that are already ongoing that need to be sustained. And I think that is something that as funders, is an area for improvement for sure, is recognizing the value of ongoing multi-year funding, and taking a more trust-based approach, and allowing projects to really get going. Something I really find in my role, my whole role is evaluation, and sometimes these funding programs, we're reporting on the impact, but really we won't see that, like, let's say in a year, or HCI sunsetting, we're looking at the impact now, but the impact will be felt in 2 years, 3 years, 5 years as well. And we don't have an opportunity necessarily to go back and collect the impact then. And so I just really want to name that this ongoing piece is really tricky. And I think that is an area that funders can really, I would say, improve on, is providing that ongoing funding. And I think maybe one thing that we could think about from an evaluation context in terms of sustainability is that someone actually mentioned it in the chat. There's a monitoring piece of, in these long-term projects, how do we know, not just at the end of a project, but as we're going, how are we monitoring our impact as we go, building in that evaluative mindset from the beginning? And how do we have some maybe checkpoints along the way that we can communicate, we know we're on track, or maybe we know we're not on track, but because we have this maybe indicator, we have some sort of data coming in, maybe there's stories, but there's something that's telling us something's not working, and here's how we're pivoting. And so I think as a sector, if we're building in that capacity from the beginning, it allows, I would hope, for more sustainable projects, because instead of saying, oh, it didn't work, we're not going to fund this going forward, or, oh, we have to give some money back or something, there's a chance to pivot and grow and learn together and support in the long term. But I also I don't want to be sort of naive about the context that right now ongoing sustainable funding is really challenging in the sector. And I think it's something that funders really need to consider the impact of ongoing sustainable funding.
And I think one thing that I think sustainability on its own can be a long discussion. And I think sometimes we also need to think about sustainability beyond dollars. And I think there's a lot of wisdom in communities. For example, I think sometimes there are impactful organizations that do the work with their community. And I think sometimes even without funders being engaged, there's a lot of impact being created in the communities. But how to sustain that is, I think, a bigger question for all of us. But I think it's important for us to continue to think about sustainability beyond funding. It's also about kind of creating, organizationally, for example, creating sustainability of the organization from succession planning perspective, from building capacity perspective. So those are, but I think there's much more deeper discussion that needs to happen. It's not an easy question to answer. Anybody? I know we can also entertain a couple of questions from the audience. Any thoughts before we go to the next question from audience?
I guess I could just share a little bit about sustainability. I mean, as you mentioned, it's a whole conversation of itself and by itself, really. And it's a tricky because like a lot of the public funding that we do get either could be cut depending on who is the government in power. And so all you can really hope and praise and do is ensuring your programming and your organizational structure and everything else is in order for when those moments and those opportunities come across your desk to either get sponsorship or foundational donations and things of that sort. So it's definitely being prepared for the moment is the biggest thing. But also, I mean, yeah, our work is as much as we would love for it to be infinitely funded, it's just not the case. And I always go back to the words of my mentor, Mikey Prosserman. If you're going into this field, into this world, just know that you're always going to be hustling. And that's just how it is. The systems, it may take time for the systems to change, but at this current moment, know that fundraising and hustling is going to be your bread and butter. Because without that, then the work stops if you stop, right? And as bleak as it might sound, it's also it's a real perspective on what kind of work you're getting yourself into. So if you're going into this thinking like, oh, I'm going to get funding and everything's just going to work itself out and the funding is always going to be unlimited, then you're really just doing the work with blinders on and not really seeing what's really out there. And so just having that mentality of, not to say like there's not money for everyone, there is plenty of money. It's just a matter of how can we access it, how can the right people access it, and knowing that focusing on the quality of your work and what you're providing for the community, again, should always come before chasing the money. But of course, chasing the money is a part of it to ensure that the programs and the quality that you're trying to deliver is to what your standards are. And yeah, just continue to grind, continue to make the changes that you wish to see through the work that you're already doing. Like as I mentioned before, advocating for yourself. If you have the opportunity to be on boards, to be on grant committees and stuff like that, if the funders allow for that to happen, by all means, take up those positions. Because again, like if it's not you that's trying to secure the funding for your groups or for your communities, someone else that's not a part of your community will be doing that. And so, the opportunity might be taken away from you from that case. So I always advocate and for those that I also try to mentor is, advocate for yourself and try to get as much opportunity, get into those doors and rooms where you are at least providing your voice to who gets funded and who is receiving the money.
Very, very wise words. Shaila, I know there are some questions. I'm trying to go into the chat, but I wonder if you could
I can bring some forward.
Bring some of those, yeah. And I really want also for Patricia to have a bit of time to show the work that she's doing as well.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for the perspectives that have been coming up for folks. I'm just sitting with some of the reflections that came up and some of the examples, I wanted to add to the conversation a perspective from just HCI, something that hasn't been named yet. It was another source of support, sources of support outside of funding that could be beneficial.
I think we're losing you.
To organizations.
Oh,
there's also
we lost you a bit. We
hearing me now?
a bit. If you can go back to now,
Okay.
now we can hear you, but we lost you for a bit.
Wonderful. Outside of finances, I just wanted to name our guest offer too for all of our amazing speakers. Are there any other forms of support that exist for organizations beyond grants? Myself, I just wanted to offer some of the examples that came up from other HCI projects that I've been able to interact with over the year. Other supports have looked like in-kind support through space being offered, businesses, local businesses in communities offering to provide food or meals for community members, also being able to offer other resources, whether that was tech, like computer access, access to screens, chairs for community events. I just want to offer that as a bit of insight around what exists outside of granting or finances, and then throw that back to you all. Yeah. What other forms are there of support? Are there or have you experienced in each of your works that could support community organizations?
Yeah. No, I think I just want to go quickly. We earlier talked about kind of leveraging on the wisdom of the community. I think that captures everything that you shared, and I think it's also for organization. I think Jason, you mentioned that doing good work and quality work is a way of sustaining the work. That's a very, very important point. And I think it's also, there's a lot of partnerships. One of the things that I remember, I was a college instructor for over 10 years. One of the things that I realized that there's a lot of support from the colleges through internship, for example, or through a number of partnerships that you could actually create, or get some fantastic support, but also a collaborative learning opportunity with academic institutions for nonprofit organizations, but I think also for funders as well, when you're doing some research and studies. And I think that's huge in terms of being able to take away from some of the expenses that you could, so that's part of the in-kind support. I think there's a lot of resources that we could also access. There's a lot of capacity building opportunities, for example, for organizations to, particularly around evaluation, around how to share, how to kind of improve relationship with funders, or maybe create equal partnership with funders. And I think this is something that we are actually currently working on, and I'm happy to chat with people as well, as you can inform the work that we're doing as well. So those are a couple of things that I mentioned. Anybody, Caitlin or Alisa, Adam, Jason,
Yeah, I can jump in. I think one of the things we benefited from HCI was they gave us a grant or just a bit of funding to host a placemaking workshop for our network last March. So we were able to bring in folks who were interested in running projects in the upcoming year, and we brought in project leaders from past years to kind of share their experiences. So I think Lynn in the comments mentioned that her group and community association was able to share the story of their project. And yeah, I think it was just a really important time for us to realize that was a good level of support for both past projects and future projects. It was just that network building of like-minded people in our city. So we were super grateful for HCI to be able to support us in that. And we're looking forward to kind of making that kind of a long-standing event or workshop for our program, just to knit the network a little bit better.
Yeah, I could speak a little bit about the other forms of support. Of course, with the in-kind stuff, donations of food, space, specifically equipment, those are all great things. This is also why, having a really strong and impactful program or project should be prioritized, because that's essentially what you're going to be using to leverage your relationships or your discussions and meetings with potential donors and supporters, because again, the work will speak for itself. If the work is really strong and impactful, then it should shake the person that you're talking to into agreeing that whatever your project or program is needed for the community, and it should motivate them or at least inspire them to contribute somehow, some way. If that's not the case, I believe the other second support that our organizations can receive is mentorship. Mentorship comes a long way. It goes a long way, I should say, in terms of getting the knowledge, the networks, the reach that you need, or just like the understanding of experiences that past that they've gained over the years. That's always so valuable, and I feel like it's one of the biggest resources that we utilize, and it's usually something that we always try to implement even in our programs. That you're not just in this alone. You're not a participant in this alone. If you are a part of the programs that we are offering, know that our intentions are to increase your networks, increase your chances of gaining a mentor, in hopes that even beyond the programming, if our programming ends today, are you still learning, or are you still connected to the community? And we try to do that through mentorship, whether that is from us as mentors, or someone else that we hire or bring in, or they could be just someone in the community that has the time and the knowledge to share, and we try to bring that out as much as we possibly can. So mentorship is definitely one of the biggest resources that I feel is should be utilized and be given freely.
Fantastic, fantastic. Tishana, I don't know, we have about 9 minutes. Maybe the last word is just to second what Jason said, that if work is grounded in community, then that could be a huge source of sustainability.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. And thank you all for the different perspectives, examples that were named throughout the discussion. I just want to speak to how dynamic of a space this is, having the opportunity to bring funders, but also bring grantees in to share their perspectives. It's something that we haven't done at the HCI community. And I'm really grateful for the opportunity to just hold
I think
Wait, lost her?
you froze a bit for a bit.
We'll never know what she was grateful for.
Oh, there you go. She's back. I believe you were at holding space for everyone. Yeah, I think that was the end of your sentence.
Oh no. But yes, just thanking everybody for the perspectives brought forward. I'll turn it over to Eva to share some closing remarks and next steps for us as far as resources to keep everyone connected.
Thanks, everyone. Huge thank you to all the panelists and to Patricia as well. We will be sharing a survey in the chat to have an opportunity for everyone to share ways that we could improve and any thoughts from this session. We'll also be recording this session, and I'll be sharing it via email, so anyone can check it out, share with anyone in your organization after the fact as well. And yeah, I think that's everything from our ends. I'll post as well in the chats some stories that you can take a look at from our website. And I welcome everyone to share contact information as well. And thanks again. Thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Jason, Kathleen, Alyssa, Patricia. Take care.